This lecture is from chapter 11 and it is specifically on personality testing, which I think for this week is when you all do a personality test and discuss your results. So it's good to have information about that. So let's get started. As you know, I love to do quotes at the beginning of each lecture. If you know a person's personality type, their behavior begins to make sense. So I think we can definitely relate someone's personality, the way they think and the way they feel, to their behavior. We can almost predict their behavior. So personality testing. Let's look at Hans Eysenck first. He believed that our personality is largely governed by biology, and he divided personality into three dimensions: introversion versus extroversion, neuroticism versus stability, and psychoticism versus superego control. So let's just make a little more sense of those three dimensions. The first is introversion versus extroversion. Introverts tend to seek less stimulation. They reflect in quiet moments. They tend to be slower and think before speaking. They value one-on-one friendships. They favor independence as opposed to working in a team. And as you can imagine, they avoid the center of attention and they value very deep experiences. Extroverts, on the other hand, tend to seek greater stimulation. They're energized by being around people instead of being by themselves. They tend to think out loud. They enjoy having a very large social network and working in teams and being in crowds. They enjoy the center of attention and they value broad variety of experiences. Let's look at the next one, which is neuroticism. People low in neuroticism tend to be very emotionally stable, calm, relaxed, even-tempered. They're able to deal with high stress. As it says, they perform well in fast-paced environments and deal well with adversity. So obviously that, as you can imagine, that would make them suitable for leadership positions and high-pressure roles. Whereas someone with high neuroticism is less able to cope with high levels of stress, and they're for that reason capable of performing better in a calmer environment with low levels of stress. So, how did he organize these personality factors? We know his personality factors, but how did he put those together? Well, he used this little chart here, which I know has a lot of words, so we won't read through every one of those. But as you can see, on the left is extroverted, on the right is introverted, the top is stable, and then the bottom is unstable. So he found that there were 4 different sections. Some people are extroverted and stable, which leads to the same line, which you can read the aspects of that person. Some are unstable and extroverted, which leads to choleric traits. Some are stable and introverted, which leads to the phlegmatic traits. Some are unstable and introverted, which would be a person with a melancholic personality. Again, I'm not going to read all those little aspects of the personality, but you can take a look at that, come back to this slide, and maybe see what fits you. Eysenck later created 2 more categories. He said people who are high on psychoticism tend to be independent thinkers. They're cold, they're nonconformist, impulsive, antisocial, and hostile. People who are high on superego control tend to have high impulse control. They're more altruistic, empathetic, cooperative, and conventional. So now let's look at the 5-factor model. Number 1 is experience. Openness to experience is characterized by imagination, feelings, actions, and ideas. People who score high on this factor tend to be curious and have a wide range of interests. Number 2, conscientiousness. This is characterized by competence, self-discipline, thoughtfulness, and achievement striving or goal-directed behavior. People who score high on this factor are hardworking and dependable. Number 3, extroversion, which we've already looked at extroversion a little bit, but that's characterized by sociability, assertiveness, excitement seeking, and emotional expression. People who score high on this factor are usually described as outgoing and warm. Number 4, agreeableness, the tendency to be pleasant, cooperative, trustworthy, and good-natured. People who score low on agreeableness tend to be described as rude and uncooperative. The last and 5th, neuroticism. This is the tendency to experience negative emotions. People high on neuroticism tend to experience emotional instability and are characterized as angry, impulsive, and hostile. People reporting high levels of neuroticism also tend to report feeling anxious and unhappy. In contrast, people who score low in neuroticism tend to be calm and even tempered. So those are the 5, that's the 5-factor model. Those are the 5 factors. So here we again have the 5 factors and kind of what they indicate. Again, we won't go through all those personality traits, but you can see it kind of shows people who are high in neuroticism versus low, high, low in extroversion, high, low in openness, high, low in agreeableness, and high, low in consciousness. It shows their different traits that they tend to have. So let's look at the test here, the MMPI, probably the most popular personality inventory. MMPI stands for Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. First published in 1943, it's very long. It has 504 true-false questions. And the updated version in 1989 actually has 567 questions. In 2008, the test was again revised using more advanced methods, and that one is called the MMPI-2RF. So this version is shorter, thank goodness. It takes about 1/2 the time to complete and has only 338 questions, which still is a lot, but at least it's shorter. Typically, the tests are administered by computer. Although the MMPI was originally developed to assist in the clinical diagnosis of psychological disorders, it is now also used for occupational screening, such as in law enforcement and in college, career, and marital counseling. So it's used for many different things, and again, probably the most popular personality inventory. So as we mentioned, it has many true and false questions. Some examples of those questions could be, number 1, I like mechanics magazines. Number 4, I think I would enjoy the work of a librarian. Number 7, I like to read newspaper articles on crime. Number 9, my daily life is full of things that keep me interested. So multiple questions just asking basics like this that help the psychologist determine your personality type. So beyond a test like an MMPI would be projective testing. During this type of testing, a series of ambiguous cards is shown to the person being tested, who then is encouraged to project their feelings, impulses, and desires onto the cards, essentially by telling a story or interpreting an image or completing a sentence. The Rorschach ink blot test, which most of us have seen or heard of, and I'll show you an example in the next slide, employs a series of 10 bilaterally symmetrical ink blot cards, of which some are black or gray and others could contain applications of color. The test taker is asked to provide their perceptions or perspectives on the presented ambiguous ink blot images. This test was designed to look for patterns of thought disorder in schizophrenia and has evolved, just like the MMPI, to include other areas like personality, emotional disorders, and intelligence. So as I mentioned, let's look at an example of some of those ambiguous ink blot images. So as you can see, they're very ambiguous. You can't depict it as one certain thing, but the tester allows the testee to determine what they see, tell a story, come up with a sentence, and then their personality is interpreted from that. Another similar test is called the TAT, or the Thematic Apperception Test. A person taking the TAT is shown 8 to 12 ambiguous pictures and is asked to tell a story about each picture. The stories give insight into their social world, revealing hopes, fears, interests, and goals. The storytelling format helps to lower a person's resistance, divulging unconscious personal details. It has been used in clinical settings to evaluate psychological disorders, as the others were initially, as you remember, developed for that, but more recently it has been used in counseling settings to help clients gain a better understanding of themselves and achieve personal growth. So let's look at an example of one of those ambiguous pictures. This is just one of the pictures that can be used of the 8 to 12 pictures. Again, it's pretty ambiguous. We don't know exactly what's going on in the picture, but obviously not as ambiguous as the Rorschach ink blot test. So the client can just tell a story about what's going on here, which the idea is that's going to reveal subconscious ideas or feelings and reveal part of their personality. Another test is called the RISB, or the Rotter Incomplete Sentence Blank. There are 3 forms of this test for use with different age groups. There's the school form, the college form, and the adult form. The tests include 40 incomplete sentences that people are asked to complete as quickly as possible. The average time for completing the test is approximately 20 minutes, as responses are only 1 to 2 words in length. So it definitely doesn't take as long as some of the other tests that we've mentioned here. It's similar to a word association test, and like other types of projective tests, it is presumed that responses will reveal desires, fears, and struggles. The RISB is used in screening college students for adjustment problems and in career counseling. So just as with the others, let's look at an example of that test. So it might be very, very simple starts to sentences. I feel, I regret, at home, my mother, my greatest worry. And as you can imagine, that really could reveal some things that are going on and worrying you and your adjustment level and your personality. There's also the Contemporized Themes Concerning Blacks test, CTSB. It's difficult to assess the personalities and lifestyles of members of widely divergent ethnic cultural groups using personality instruments that were based on data from a single culture or race. For example, when the TAT was used with African American test takers, the result was often shorter story length and low levels of cultural identification. Therefore, it was vital to develop other personality assessments that explored factors such as race, language, and level of acculturation. To address this need, Robert Williams developed the first culturally specific projective test designed to reflect the everyday life experiences of African Americans. And again, the updated version of the instrument is the Contemporized Themes Concerning Blacks test. The CTSCB contains 20 color images that show scenes of African American lifestyles. When the CTCB was compared with the TAT for African Americans, it was found that use of the CTCB led to increased story length, higher degrees of positive feelings, and stronger identification, which would obviously make it easier to determine that person's personality or how they would fit into a certain organization. It would make it easier to determine that. So that's also a personality test that has been developed. Those are the main personality tests that are used. Obviously, they're used for other things also. But hopefully you got a good idea of those various tests. Thank you for listening, and let me know if you have any questions.